Hey guys, and welcome back to the INSITE channel. Today in the Crosshair, we have DarfMike. The wonder boy of NACS has rocketed his way through the talent scene, most notably creating a fantastic show over at Cologne. And before we get any further, how are you doing today? Like, you must be quite wrecked after Cologne, I can imagine, but also like feeling quite satisfied.
Oh, I'm happy, man. I actually was less destroyed after Cologne than I thought I would be. My voice somehow
Okay.
hung on. It was a little raspy. Like, honestly, I think the plane ride did worse to my voice than the final, which is surprising. But it hung on. Didn't lose it at all. Did a little sleep deprived. But
Yeah.
that's what recovery's for. I'm feeling good, man. That show was incredible. It was an amazing
Mm.
event to be part of. That's, the kind of event I've dreamed about my entire career, and being part of it, being on that stage, being there in the flesh, it was absolutely what I wanted from it. So yeah, I'm happy, man. That is the prevailing emotion. Happy,
Yeah.
satisfied. Next week I'll want to get back to it, but that's how it always is after events.
Yeah, it must be so like. Actually, yeah, I didn't even think like how because you're gonna go back straight to ECL casting.
hmm
Like how? Because I say this to a lot of teams sometimes when they go from playing like I think Monty's like a great example. They go from playing LANs now online grinds. Like how do you and then you just compare that to you? It's like how do you go from doing all these big events to then going okay, I'm gonna have to take this ECL match seriously that goes for 4.5 hours and a team like misses a defuse. Like how do you take that seriously after going from like Cologne Katowice?
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit recently in an interview with us too,
Yeah.
where it is a very different energy.
Mm.
The difference between LAN and arena in particular, as opposed to online work, I mean, there's a lot of differences, but one of the big differences is just energy. You
Yeah.
get you when you're working in front of a live crowd, especially with the role that I'm doing, so much of your energy is coming from that crowd. It's kind of like a feedback loop, right? I'm feeding into them, they're feeding into me. How can I not be loud when 15,000 people are screaming? Like it's
Yeah.
impossible to not feel that excitement. If you don't feel excitement standing on stage in front of that crowd, you're dead. You're like, you should check
Yeah.
for a pulse. You know what I mean? So that makes it easy to bring the level, to bring the energy. For online casting, it's different, right? It's a different environment. If I treated it the same way as I did Cologne, it just would seem silly to the audience as well.
Mm.
It's much more laid back. At this point, this is I don't even want to count season of ECL. I think I've been doing it since like season 27, 28, something like that.
Mm.
So, there's a familiarity with me, with the audience, especially in the NA. I'm very comfortable within the vibe. I know my producers and all that. So it's a little bit more laid back. It's a little bit more jokey. Obviously, you still want to give the games the respect they deserve for the teams, but you don't want to oversell it. Because, I mean, teams understand it too. As you said,
Yeah.
it's different for them playing online versus on LAN. It's different being on the stage in Cologne
Yeah.
versus being in your bedroom sipping Coke or whatever the meme
Mm.
was. So it's a balance. I think the thing that I remind myself of anytime that I'm starting to feel like the grind of online work, because you're doing if you're doing these qualifiers, sometimes you're doing multiple, 3 best of 3s a day. It gets long. You're sitting in your room. It's hard to find that energy. It's just important to sort of take that step back, take stock, and realize that it's still, maybe it's not Cologne, but it's still better than virtually any other job you could be doing.
Yeah.
So it's still fantastic. And for me, what I like to use ECL for, especially in North America, is just keeping track of teams, players, talents, people who are moving up. I think one of the privileges of my position in the scene, of how I'm doing these international events now, but I still come home and I do a lot of the NA stuff, which frankly, a lot of the NA guys don't get to do to the same degree. Scrawny, Launders, Maui, they try and keep track at home. Jason, Jason. But when you're working events, you focus on the teams you're working with, right? And so I get an opportunity to watch a lot of these teams, watch a lot of these players come up, so that when they make their appearance at a Katowice, at an ESL Challenger, I'm not surprised, because I've known they've been on the come up. And so I can share that knowledge, and I can bring that knowledge to a broadcast. And so, yeah, there's a lot to like about ECL still. It's different, and you have to find different degrees of enjoyment in it. And don't get me wrong, where did the kettle go off? Don't get me wrong, you're always going to love the big events more, but it's important to find the enjoyment where you can.
Yeah, because I mean, you've touched on a lot of points there, and I think kind of the one I want to talk about is that like you were talking about that grind, and you were talking about how sometimes it can be quite hard with the three best of threes. When you do work a Cologne or a Katowice, does it kind of sit back and you also go online being like, it's worth it? Because I am, oh my god, so I'm gonna close out. It's the next door. I'm gonna redo that question.
You're good. You're good. It's fine.
Fuck's sake. The fucking next door neighbor, the fucking drilling. Oh my god. Okay, sorry. I'll cut this out. I'm just gonna read the question.
You're good. All good. I get it. Production challenges.
Fuck's sake.
Life.
Okay. I'm just gonna redo it.
Yep.
So you've touched on a lot of points there, and the one I kind of want to look at at first is you're talking about grind and how in these ECL days and these qualifiers, you're like three best of threes, late days. When you work a Cologne or Katowice, do you kind of sit back some days, especially when you're online, and go, okay, this is worth it because I know my goal and I'm actively working towards it. But before you'd hit that goal, did it almost make it quite difficult to be like, I know what I'm working towards?
Yes, no. Let me think about that. Yeah, I mean, ultimately, being there, being in Cologne, it's a culmination. For some people, the last year or two of my career has seemed like a meteoric rise. But the reality is I've been doing this since 2017, right?
Yeah.
I've been full-time for 4 years now. I've been doing it for 6 years, which is crazy to think about. There were a lot of small NA lands that no one was watching before I was on stage in front of 15K people. So, yeah, it is a culmination of the career. These are skills that I've been developing, that I've been building. There's a certain amount of innate talent for this work that you either have or you don't have, but there's a whole lot of work that goes into building the personality, building the comfort, building the relationships within the scene, getting to know the scene, building the knowledge. So it is a culmination, right? And all the other things that I do have gotten me there for sure. I don't know that I'm self-aware enough to have that holistic a view when I'm in the moment,
Yeah.
But there definitely is an element at times of like, okay, we're working, we're building. Like, for me, it's one of the hard things about the way that talent work works when you're a freelancer, which 99% of us are, is that ultimately the only way to track your progress is through external validation. And by that, I mean, are you getting hired for events?
Yeah.
Fundamentally is the way that you track how well you're doing. So there's certain times where getting an event or not getting an event is kind of like a mental check of, okay, this is where I am. This is where I think I am. This is where I actually am, that kind of thing. So to give you an example, like getting hired onto Cologne, this first season of the year, I had a really good season, right? I worked Katowice. I worked the RMR in Monterey. I worked IEM Dallas, an event that I really wanted to do, and I worked the Blast Spring Finals in DC, an event that was amazing. Didn't expect it, was fantastic to do. So I viewed a lot of momentum going into the break, right? I felt great. I thought I'd done really good work. I'd had a lot of positive feedback. I was extremely happy. But I also knew Cologne, right after the break, it's like, okay, if I get Cologne, I am doing well. My first Cologne, this is where I think I am. If I don't, gonna have to think about that. And I did get the event, fortunately, and I got the in-arena for it as well. And now, that to me is a positive check of, yes, I'm doing this right. I'm on the right path, progressing. But, at the end of the day, we can control what we can control in terms of doing good work, in terms of building the repertoire, in terms of networking and pressing, all those things. But at the end of the day, someone's got to hire you if you're freelance talent and you want to work these big events. Someone's got to hire you, and that's always going to be the check.
Yeah, okay. So does that, especially when you're doing the early events, like when you, like, I think it'd be fair to say maybe like being tested before you get to a Cologne, does it put a little bit of pressure on you? Because you're like, okay, a lot of what my like income comes from not my decision, but to make it not my decision, I have to do the best I can. Do you maybe feel a little bit pressure being like, okay, I have this opportunity, I have to perform now, like going into maybe these early opportunities?
Not, I wouldn't describe it as pressure. I mean, it's we're in a performance-based industry, right? So it's always going to be that way. you either you do a good job or you're not going to keep doing that job. But it's not so much a pressure. Like if I'm doing an event, I want to do a great job. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I want to kill it. I want to crush it. That's for me. That's for the people on the broadcast with me. That's for the people who chose to hire me. That's for, whoever in this is coming along for the ride. So I guess it's a pressure. I don't really feel it as such.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you have a big, I just realized, can I swear on this?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. If you have a big fuck up on broadcast, you're not going to feel great about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, it's like any job, any industry. It's just, there's just a lot more focus on your moments, especially as a host. You may only be live for 7-8 minutes every map. And so if you mess up in those 7-8 minutes, it is more magnified. As a caster, you're going. You're inevitably going to have some mess ups in a map, but those will quickly be washed away by the rest of the map. If you're a host, it's a little bit more under a magnifying glass. So there's nerves, but I don't know that I'd describe it as pressure to, like, the external pressure isn't as great as the internal pressure of wanting to do a good job or wanting to really crush the opportunity, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense quite a lot. And okay, so I just wanted to talk early on about like Cologne, and I wanted to because I think it's a very immediate topic, and I just wanted to kind of talk about some of the stuff around that, and then kind of head back to the beginning now and talk more about like your early days of like how you got into it, because as you said, you've been around for quite a while, and I think you, as you said, like a very notable name within NA Counter-Strike because of that is because you started casting in like 2017. Doing a lot of NA stuff. So getting into that position, how did you get into casting? Like, were you playing like somewhat competitively before CS, or did you just go straight into casting? Like, how did that happen?
Important clarifier here. I'm not good at the game. I'm better now than I have ever been, and I'm still not great. But no,
what's the level we're talking about? Like, how bad or how good?
I mean, I've never gone beyond to open, but I've also never taken that remotely seriously. But yeah, I mean, I'm like a pretty good, but by the average pool of players, I'm probably a pretty good Counter-Strike player because I know how things work. But by anything approaching our industry pros, any of that, I ain't sniffing them. I'm not touching it. I got when you saw the Cologne champion hoodies where it was the 5 rolls, right? I got the entry because that way I can die first and justify it. So that's
so
me.
Before you continue, shout out Jack, our graphic designer.
Shout out
INSITE,
Jack.
Designed those. So big shout out Jack.
Do a good job.
And I've ordered 2. They're almost here.
They're very nice. They're very nice. They are nice hoodies. I got a lot. I got one for myself. I got one for my girlfriend. I got a couple for gifts for other people. So I was bringing back a sweatshirt of hoodies. But yeah, what were we talking about?
About how did you get into commentating?
How did I get into commentating?
Yeah, like how did you get into this sphere?
So I started watching Counter-Strike in 2014, 2015. Trying to think about when it was exactly. And at the time, I was not doing so well in my personal life. I was in school. I was failing in school. I was deeply depressed, dealing with some mental stuff that wound up in a major shift in my life where I wound up working in the sailing industry. And at one point I was between 2 jobs. I had a job that was starting, but not for a couple of weeks. And I saw a Reddit post on Global Offensive about Fragadelphia 10, saying we're doing this. This is the local land. This is what Fragadelphia is. Come out, watch the players, so on and so forth. Sign up with your team. And there was like a footnote in there that said also we'll be doing open caster tryouts. And I had always had that inkling when I was watching that maybe that kind of thing would in fact be for me. But how do you get started, right? If you don't know anyone in the scene, if you don't know anyone in the space, it's like, how do you even approach getting started? So I went up to Philly, hung out with some friends that weekend, walked into Fragadelphia and said, hey, I'd like to try casting. And they pointed me, in the right direction. And I sat down at a microphone and I cast like 3 maps of Counter-Strike with Bach, with MCE, and with a guy Holden, not in the scene anymore, but used to work for ESCA. And I loved it. And it was really fun. Got some positive feedback. Did a good enough job. Because I had messaged the account and I was like, hey, what's the deal with these casting tryouts? And he said, basically, we'll put you on a mic. And if you don't suck, you can keep going. And if you do suck, we'll take you off the mic. And I didn't suck enough that they, put me in touch with the producer, a guy named Rob, who was hugely helpful early on in my career. And then they started bringing me back for events because I was local. I was like a 2-hour drive from Philly. So I started doing, they called these 0.5s, which were like little local lands, for like $1,000 or whatever, in the land center. I started coming up for those. I came back for the Philadelphias. And then I started doing some ESEA casting, and I participated in the ESEA Next Big Caster Challenge. I actually was rejected from the first one for my application for the first one because I was not good enough yet. And then the second time I applied, I got it, and I wound up winning the thing, which meant that I went out to the ESEA Global Challenge and was, brought on, did some casting. That was back in the days when Pro League relegation was also decided on land at Global Challenge. So it was sick. Technically, I cast Pro League. They had the Pro League insignia behind me.
Yeah.
Didn't really, but we were pumped. Me and at the time Magic Helmet was my casting partner on that. We're taking selfies with the Pro League logo of like, we're casting Pro League, hell yeah. And so then I started working with ESEA, and I did a lot of work with them. Global Challenges, did ESEA Rank S Combine, which is a ridiculous, very fun event in Vegas. Through that, also started doing a lot of stuff in Nerd Street. There was a summer where they had like a bunch of lands all across the country, traveled for those. Just cast more and more and more, and it got my name out there. And then for the hosting stuff, the way that started was I did some of the DreamHack online games or online tournaments as a host back when those were a thing in like 2021, COVID era. And then I got the opportunity to come out to Katowice for IEM Fall, the RMR. And then it just, kept going. So that's the career in brief,
kind of like career brief. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's really interesting with the Desk Coast, because it does feel like, and as we kind of spoke before, like you've made that like seismic change from like commentating to now like host role. Mm-hmm. How did that come about? Was that something that you actively pushed and you went and you were like, I want to do this? Or were they like, you'd be good at this, you come do this?
So the first time I hosted was at an ESEA Global Challenge because Davey was supposed to be hosting it, which actually didn't make sense then because he wasn't a host. But
I was going to say,
sick. And so he couldn't do it. He couldn't cross the border. So he wound up staying in Canada. So I wound up filling in for the host last minute. And I really loved it. I had a really good time with it. I enjoyed it very much. And so then it was like, okay, I would love to do more of this. And then that was 2019. And then COVID happened. So I didn't do anything for a long time hosting because you don't, they do host for online events, but it's frankly, like not as necessary.
No.
So then when the DreamHacks were looking for a host, I think it was largely because Frankie took maternity leave at the time, took a step back to have her child, which shout outs Frankie Ward taking a break to have a child.
Yeah.
Very reasonable thing to do as a human being, but also probably gave me my jump into hosting. I think I probably got the opportunity largely because of that, at least for IEM Fall. They threw me on DreamHacks because they were looking for someone to do some hosting, and Jackson Wolf, who is now a project manager who does, at this point, he does ESL Pro League and IEM Dallas, I think are his purview. But at the time, he had just made the transition from working with ESEA, where I had known him for a number of years, worked together a lot, to now going over to the ESL side of things. And he sort of put my name up, and shout outs again to Jackson. I owe him a lot for that one. And I think that's how I wound up getting the first opportunities in towards IEM Fall. And then it went well, and then they wanted me for Katowice, which was a big jump, but a good one.
Yeah, I was like, so how would you have gone from almost like preparing one of those events where like you're doing the DreamHacks and then out of nowhere Katowice, like as you said, massive big jump, and probably like one of the biggest jump, like probably like one of the first big breaks in your career. Like, how would you have gone from like mentally and also just preparing the event in general? Like, how did maybe you shift a focus, or were you just kind of like, I'm going to keep the same I've always been doing, and I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing?
I mean, it's definitely a different scale in terms of production, in terms of the resources that you have available. But I mean, frankly, they hired you. In this case, they hired me because of who I was, because of what I had done, because of what I brought to the table in previous gigs. If I hadn't done a good job at those, they weren't going to bring me on. So the way that I prepared, the things that I knew, that the knowledge that I had is part of what makes me a good host. So it wasn't necessarily that I had to prepare radically differently. Don't get me wrong. I definitely took more notes ahead of Katowice than I usually do. But usually I'm a little, or in my young years, I was a little lazy about notes. So definitely did a little bit more focus on that.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think the preparation was largely the same. I mean, it was definitely a balance of, working with a lot of new people that first Katowice, working with a lot of people who I've been watching for a long time, but I hadn't had the opportunity to work with, working with new producers, things along those lines. Although actually my producer on the first Katowice was a guy who I'd been working with on Online Challenger for like a year. So I knew him pretty well. So no, I don't think the preparation really changed. It's you build good habits, you build good knowledge, you build good skills to get to that point. If you don't have those, you're probably not getting the opportunity. And if you don't have those by the time you get to the opportunity, you're probably not getting a second one.
Yeah. Okay. And then so looking at those like opportunities that you get given, I feel like sometimes there's almost like a conversation. People say, is it just dumb luck? Because we're all grinding and it's just like, who is gonna get the offer? Do you believe in that aspect, that it is maybe just like, okay, I got a little bit lucky when I got this gig, and then I got lucky to get the gig and then I crushed it? Or are there other factors that you were kind of like implementing during this time that you sat back and went, okay, I deserve it, that I have got these?
I think that generally speaking, talent life in CS in particular, I'm not going to say I know this to be true in other esports because I know different scenes are different. But at the end of the day, CS in particular is going to be a meritocracy, because there is okay. Let me think about that. There may be people who merit it who don't get the opportunities because they don't have the situation or the connections or the knowledge, or people don't know that they exist to give them the opportunities. But if you aren't good at what you do, you're not going to last, because there is a ton of talent in the CS space. There are a ton of talented colleagues who could all do a certain job. And so, yeah, I don't think it's just dumb luck. I think that obviously a lot of people come into it from very different ways, and by and large, there's not a traditional pipeline, right?
Oh yeah,
this is a job that 20, 30 people in the world do, right? It's not like we have a corporate ladder you can climb. So at the end of the day, getting a break, getting an opportunity, there's going to be a degree of you're just in the right place at the right time, or you know the right person, or the right person knows you. But as I said before, if you get to that point and you're not prepared to deliver, you're probably not going to be back. So there's an element of luck, of having opportunities, but as the saying goes, you make your own luck, in that you put yourself in the position to take advantage of those opportunities. You put yourself in the position to get those opportunities. And if you're not prepared, if your skills aren't there, if you aren't good at what you do, when that opportunity comes around, if you fall flat in your face, happens.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there are definitely some examples in history of some people maybe like getting that chance, and like we just haven't seen them since. So for someone like you who got that chance and is now consistently getting these events, what have you done, and how have you kind of almost like done that? Like, how did you sit there and like do well and then continue being hired? Like, what do you think from your perspective you did well to continue that?
To reframe this, you mean what do I do well as a host to do a good job on these opportunities?
Yeah, to do a good job and impress like the higher ups, to then they are like, okay, we're going to continue hiring him, especially when you got these like opening gigs.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally doing a good job, right? For the most part, again, I'm not going to speak conclusively. I haven't worked with everyone in this space. For the most part, people high up in CS want to see you crush it, and they know what a good broadcast looks like, and they know what good Counter-Strike is, and they understand the game well enough that they're an informed perspective. So if you do a good job, and of course this is a very important one, you're not an asshole to work with, that's what you want to do. As far as what I do well, I think that my greatest asset as a host, and something that's translated to in-arena hosting very well, and it was one of my greatest assets as a caster as well, it still is, I guess, is my ability to translate enthusiasm and excitement to the audience. At the end of the day, I love Counter-Strike. I love watching Counter-Strike. I love the storylines. I love building them. I love, watching competition. I love being part of a show. It is really fun for me. All of this, every part of the job is really fun for me. And I think that one of the things that I in particular do well is let that shine through. I think that audiences tend to vibe with it. I think that audiences, by and large, get a really good sense of it as well. I think in particular with the in-arena where I'm there with people really resonate with it. And so there's lots of, technical skills and this, that, and the other thing. But fundamentally, if you had to identify like one core thing about my hosting and what I bring and what I think is an asset for what I do, I think it's my ability to translate excitement and passion and have that vibe with the audience. Because at the end of the day, that's why they're watching, right? Is because they're excited, is because they're passionate, is because they like the game. So I think that's probably the thing that I do best. It's something that has definitely helped me and has resonated through my career. And again, just if in terms of like you're asking like things to do to be, good going forward in your career, be easy to work with. Be easy to work with. Be a good, friendly person. You don't have to be the greatest human being in existence. You don't have to be buying everyone coffee every morning or that kind of thing. Though certainly no one's going to be mad at you if you're doing that. But you have to be agreeable to work with.
Yeah.
You have to, getting along with people is important. We're all there for 2 weeks slammed in a room together. If you're butting heads with everybody, that's not a good vibe. It's going to translate on the broadcast. People are not going to have as good of a time. So being easy to work with for your colleagues, for the people around the desk with you, with your casters, with your directors, with your production work harder, longer hours than anyone else. And, so when you get there and you're tired and you've had a long day and you haven't had enough sleep, just remember the guy who's in your ear probably has it worse. By and large, maybe he doesn't need to be as like presentable as you do, but damn, they still got to be on. They still got to be thinking. They still got to be on their game. Otherwise, a cue is going to get missed, or a switch is going to get missed, or the wrong graphics going to come up. So, being easy to work with, being flowing with everybody, I think that's particularly important for a host, because as a host, you are the bridge between production and talent. You are the bridge between the analyst desk and the casters. You are the bridge between the players coming on and the casters. You are the conduit through which everyone else connects to a degree. And so having a good relationship with everybody in there, being, just good to work with, being that people see that you're on the list and they go, oh, cool, Mike's here. Like, let's, that I understand our rapport. I understand our flow. We can work well together and, have a good time doing it. That's huge. Fundamentally, there's a saying. It's like you can be. There's a few sayings that basically have the same idea, but it's like you could be one of three things. You could be two or three things. You could be lazy, dumb, and you could be lazy, dumb, or mean. If you're all three of them, ain't no one hiring you. If you're one of them, maybe you can get away with it. If you're mean, but you're the best at your job, people might still hire you because of it. Yeah. If you're a little bit lazy, but you know what you're doing and you're friendly, well, people are going to get along with you. If you might be a little dumb, but you're hardworking and you're friendly, you can still make that work. It's fine. But if you're all three, it ain't working. So it's better to not be any of the three, right? If you can help it, be hardworking, know what you're talking about, and be easy to work with, and the jobs will keep coming in.
Yeah, that's I think very insightful and like something that can also be not necessarily just relayed to casting, but just like life. Like that's literally just life. Like it's the same principles. Yeah. But so like some of these qualities that like you possess now, maybe it's like how, especially when you're coming up, was there anyone that you would like take inspiration from, both commentating, desk, stage, like were there all three of them rather, like were there any people that you looked at and you would like actively be like, okay, I like that style and that's how I'm going to present myself, or 100%. Did you kind of like invent your own style?
No, I mean, everyone's a chameleon to some degree, especially when you start out, right? Everyone's a chameleon.
100%.
When I started casting, one of the first guys that I cast with out of Philadelphia was Scrawny. And he is, first off, this was 5-6 years ago, right? And even then, he was such a force, obviously, that when he did the major grand final, I knew he was going to crush it. I would have, if you asked me back then if he was going to crush it, I would have said yes. So he was a very dynamic, bombastic, or like just strong voice and an inspiration early on. And I am such a chameleon in my own voice that early on when I was casting, occasionally people would think I was Canadian because I was, aping Connor to such a degree that I was pronouncing vowels like he did. And I kind of had to unlearn some of that because that's obviously not good. I am a little too much of a chameleon at times. But yes, there's always going to be tentpole people that you look up to whose style you adopt. A guy that I really admire, which is funny because I've never worked any of the roles that he's worked, really, but who I think is, to me, a role model in terms of the way that he approaches a broadcast and the way that he works is Jason, is Moses, who, recently I've gotten a chance to work with a lot over the last year, and he's also a lovely person, which makes it a lot better. But one of the things that I admire about his career is that he is a Swiss Army knife. If you put him into any role, he's going to do a good job. He's going to make the people around him look better. He's going to make the broadcast flow. He's worked as an analyst. He's worked as, I think he's worked as a host at various stints. He's doing color commentary right now as his primary focus. And, at each of these different stages, he's killer. He's great. He's a guy who is always going to be dependable. If you throw to him, he's always going to have something for you. And to me, that's a role model to emulate, because I think that's a really valuable thing to bring to a broadcast, is to, even if I'm uncomfortable, even if I haven't gotten enough sleep, even if, I'm hungry or whatever it is, if you throw to me, at the end of the day, we're going to make this work. We're going to make this look smooth. Okay. We're going to make everybody look good. That to me is like a huge thing to emulate. Hosts, in terms of hosts, Richard Lewis is a guy who has a very singular style, and is not someone I would say that I've aped in style, but I've learned a lot from him. He's also given me direct advice about things. When I first started hosting, I reached out to him because I had worked with him on an online Beyond the Summit thing where we had a ton of fun, and he was very generous and gave me a lot of advice about some of the things that he had learned about hosting and fundamental principles of the way he thinks about it, things that I still absolutely hold to. So Rich is definitely an inspiration on the hosting machine in terms of just how smooth he is, in terms of, obviously he was, when I was watching, before he switched into commentary, he was the strongest host in esports for a long time. Yeah. And I'm not saying in CS, I mean in esports. He was killer. I'm fortunate that now I get to work with my role models. People like, I learned a lot from working with Shocks in terms of how she approaches preparation, looking at her notes, things like that, because she works across games, right? So she just can't be as informed on Counter-Strike as someone who is only in Counter-Strike, because she's as informed on League of Legends, and she's doing this and she's doing that. And so the preparation has to be different when you're coming into it from that perspective. So that was inspiring. I mean, watching Freya now, watching Stunna, Trace is fantastic, and they're just being like the improv god. So I think I take pieces from a lot of my colleagues. But if you're talking about like real temple inspirations, Rich would definitely be one. Jason would definitely be one. And Alex Machine would definitely be one as well. But I'm constantly learning. I'm constantly, seeing bits that other people are doing and thinking about them and embracing them as well. And I think it's a really good approach, because again, we're lucky in CS. Everyone's really damn good. So there's a lot to learn. We're very fortunate that way.
And like, especially for you now, like you kind of mentioned that working with your idols and kind of drawing it back to the stuff we were talking about at the beginning, of like the emotions. Like, are there moments where you just stand there, especially when you got you got your idols in front of you, you're in Cologne, and you just go, fuck, like, okay, this is it. Like, especially recently, did you like have those moments, and how do you deal with them actually?
Absolutely. I mean, at this point, I have worked with people enough that they are just my friends, which is cool. Yeah. It's a really cool place to be in. But definitely, that first Katowice, being, there with people, there were definitely moments where I got stars in my eyes, fanboying a little bit, trying to suppress it, because, at the end of the day, everyone's there to put on the same show. But definitely moments like that where it's an adjustment. But for me, Cologne I definitely had a huge moment in Cologne where the second day, on the Saturday of playoffs, they played, before the second match, they played the sort of farewell to Counter-Strike, the CSGO, or not to Counter-Strike, to Go.
So good.
Yeah, and it hit me a lot more than I thought it was going to. where I was just sort of thinking about like, man, for the last 6 years, this has been my career. This video game has given me a life that I would not have known about before I started. You know, I kind of just got into this on a whim, and it's my career. It's a passion. It's a pursuit. It's so many things to me now. And so I got emotional. And then at the end of the day, I went up to do, you know, after the show, basically, I would go up and give a thank you to the people in the audience, you know, saying, giving them the times for tomorrow, giving them the notes for tomorrow. And I got emotional because it's just sort of this moment where you kind of like zoom out almost on your own life. It's like, how am I here? How am I standing in front of this crowd? How am I standing on this stage in this moment, having this opportunity? And so I was a little overwhelmed. After I came off stage, I just stood in a corner backstage and just sort of like recentered a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, let myself feel what I was feeling. And it's like, okay, we're good. But I definitely have those moments. And Cologne was a big one. That was less like who I'm working with, because at that point I had worked with everybody there before, but more about like where the opportunity I'm having to work with them at the biggest, you know, realistically the biggest continuous event in Counter-Strike, right? Like, damn, man, that one hit. That one hit real well.
That is incredible. And does that get accentuated? Like, obviously, you said with a farewell message to CS, but like, does that get accentuated by the fact it's like the last CS:GO event, and you've kind of at the last opportunity now stamped yourself on the game and had that opportunity? Like, does that accentuate at all, or is it not really like a factor?
No, absolutely. You know, I will not have worked a major in CS:GO, which is a disappointment.
Okay,
but I worked at Cologne, and I worked 2 Katowices, and I worked a Blast Spring Final, you know, and so having those opportunities, having those big events, having Cologne, which is, you know, to many the third major of the year, if not the fourth, with Katowice, yeah, that means a lot, you know, to work those crown jewel events, and to have the last one in Global Offensive in a game that has meant so much. You know, I think things are going to be better and brighter in CS2. I'm very excited about that. But yeah, it's really damn cool to have been a part of this on the tail end of Go. You know, to have that farewell.
Was there, so like, just speaking about that major, was there any part of you that when like you didn't get blast, that you were actually just kind of like hit a little bit, like, okay, I've done really well, but then like you're at that weird awkward stage where it's like you're getting these events, but you're not like fair to say like the regular yet, but you are getting them. So did you kind of like almost sit there sometimes be like, okay, maybe like fair enough, I'm very happy to be where I am, so I shouldn't get overzealous about things?
Yeah, I didn't expect to work Blast. I didn't expect to work Blast at all. I mean, frankly, I was really happy to work the RMR because that was my first time, you know, making I had done like some online qualifiers for Blast, but not, you know, work directly with them. And the RMR wasn't even quite directly with them because it was them working with Acezone, but that was still, you know, a Blast event. So I had just worked that. I had no expectation of working the major. It was like, you know, like a thought in my mind, like, wouldn't this be awesome? But I didn't expect it. So yeah, it would have been amazing. Don't get me wrong, but I was not upset when I didn't get it. I also wasn't upset because realistically, if I were there, I would have been there in Tech Girl's role. Sam, she was in the host spot that you know, basically would have been the realistic one. And she's great. She's fantastic. She does great work. She's, you know, been working her ass off. She's, you know, in a geographically shitty situation, but she does phenomenal work, and I'd worked with her before, and I knew that. So I also wasn't, you know, as much as, you know, people are friends and colleagues, we also compare each other because there's only so many jobs. It's just the nature of the business. So, you know, knowing that Sam was going to be working, knowing that Sam was going to have the opportunity, I was not upset by that. I was very happy for Sam. So I wasn't upset. I would have loved to do it, but I didn't expect to. I wasn't upset by that. And then working, you know, the Blast Spring Final, which I also didn't expect to, and being reached out to do that was definitely also a salve on any upset I might have even thought I felt, which, again, I didn't think I was going to be working it. You know, now, obviously, the more work you do, the more opportunities you have, the more events where you do a good job, the expectations raise in terms of I really would like to, you know, be involved somehow in that next major cycle, whether it's just the RMRs or whether it's involved in the major. That's something that, you know, I will be pushing for. I will be trying to have conversations about.
It's kind of like looking at now, you've actually, I think you have been traveling a lot throughout your whole career, like you're saying with the Nerd Street stuff. How is like, do you have any techniques that you utilize when you do travel? Because excluding the whole time zone thing, traveling is exhausting, and that's something that has hit me quite hard at some moments when I went like start traveling to events, came home and was like, I'm dead. Built in with then the time zone, that's never an issue I've had to deal with, and I wouldn't even believe like how hard it is. So, firstly, are there times we just sit back and go, I'm actually exhausted? And then secondly, how at these events, like before, after, during, how do you deal with this like, kind of traveling stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of an advantage that growing up, I moved around a lot. I traveled a lot internationally, just by the way I grew up. So I had a lot of experience with planes. Fundamentally, travel day is going to suck. It's not going to be amazing.
Yeah.
You make it work. You sort of just, I think the stress of travel probably wears people down even more than the actual travel. And the only advice I can give for that is once you enter a travel day, just sort of give yourself up. Put yourself, you're a rock in the river. You're going to get where you need to go. Yeah, you need to focus enough to get there and not, not off on the train or whatever. But you'll get there eventually, and just sort of let the bumps and bruises of travel go through while they do. Sleep as much as you can on planes. I know that for some people that is more difficult. For some people it is easier. If you can, sleep. If you can't, that's life. Deal with it. Yeah, I mean, recovery at events can be challenging because, in addition to working the event, people are socializing afterwards. That's a lot of fun. It can be easy to go overboard. We've all been there. It's important to know when you need to be on and when you need to be focusing on yourself and taking maybe some time off, sit down, have one, and then go to bed, kind of thing. I've gotten a lot better at that as I've gotten older and more reasonable. I've recently discovered the magic of saunas. Top notch.
Yeah.
Shout out to saunas. If you've got a nice sauna in your hotel, you are blessed. Take advantage of it. Yeah, that's a good one especially for like knocking yourself out so you go to sleep at the right time. But yeah, I don't know. It's part of it. It's definitely part of it. It's definitely something that wears people down, especially if you're going. I mean, I haven't really done this as much. I've done some event to event, a couple back to back. I haven't done the event to event to event to event kind of thing, which definitely will wear you down. But finding the routines in your hotel life are good. Getting consistency on meals, on breakfasts, on wake up times. Getting a game in with the crew after, at the end of the night, having a good time with that. You're getting some routines, taking care of yourself. Gym's very helpful because everywhere will have some variety of gym. And I am naturally extremely lazy about that kind of thing. So don't think that I'm patronizing anybody here. I don't like the gym by default. I've recently started getting a little bit into it because it is helpful.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and it's actually been an absolute pleasure just watching you skyrocket your way through the talent pool, and well, simultaneously doing the Masters, the Mustache Masters, and make sure, if like the second weekend of November is definitely something that I'm not going to miss this year. And also, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I cannot wait to see more from you in CS2. But with that done, thank you for joining me for another episode of In the Crosshairs, and make sure to go drop a subscribe for the INSITE channel. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next week.